Hello and welcome to the first cooking session of Dungeons and Dragons and Dining and Dudes. The aim here isn't to turn someone into a 3-star Michelin chef, but to hopefully help out DMs and those hosting in-person sessions with ideas of cooking. What works best for groups of players, how to plan, what it costs, and how long do meals take to cook. I started doing this once I redid my kitchen back in 2018 and surprisingly unlocked a new passion. Blending this with D&D has been something that myself and my group really appreciates, so I hope you do as well. These videos are meant to inspire, and trust me, they're not going to be perfect, but let's go ahead and start with our first meal. Salmon with a mustard sauce and fried potatoes in rosemary and thyme. I wanted to start with salmon because generally it's pretty easy to cook, pretty quick to cook, and not too expensive. These 5-ounce fillets I have cost about $5 a piece. So if you have a group of 4, a group of 5, you're looking at $20, $25 a person. And again, as a DM or host, you don't necessarily have to pay for anything. If people want to cough up some money, go ahead and let them. You're the one cooking after all. So to start out, we're just going to pat our salmon dry. Make sure we get all that excess moisture off. Once I'm done doing that, flipping them over, and then we're just going to take a little bit of time, Thyme, to season them with salt. And after we're done seasoning both sides, the salt's going to help us extract any additional moisture, add some flavor. We're going to turn those over, flip them aside, get salt on each side, and then we are going to let them sit while we go ahead and prepare the potatoes. I will also add that you probably want to use a nice sea salt. More coarse, the better. It seems to have a little bit more coverage. You can see here I am just making sure I get every piece of that salmon covered. Alright, so now for the potatoes, I went with these little baby potatoes. You can use any type of potato, really. Yukon, russet. Reason I use smaller potatoes is, as you can see here, I'm just going to segment them into 4 pieces. They cook a lot faster. The last thing you want to do is throw a giant potato onto a skillet. It's going to take forever to cook. It's going to burn. There's a billion different ways you can cook potatoes, but for me, these are one of my favorite. They fry up nicely. The rosemary and thyme give them a really good flavor with a little salt and pepper. And generally speaking, you cut them to a small size. As we can see, I have about a pound here. This won't take more than about 20-25 minutes, which is perfect to do while the salmon is cooking and our sauce is also cooking as well. So we just cut them all up. We're going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon or 2, a healthy amount. We want to get them all nice and coated. Once that's done, we're going to put a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, and again, continue to stir. This is not rocket science. We're going to put a little bit of rosemary and thyme. I did about a tablespoon of thyme with about a half a teaspoon or maybe a little bit more than a teaspoon of rosemary. And you can see here I'm just shaking those both in as I give everything a nice toss. Nothing super complicated. We try to make things easy here. With the potatoes out of the way, we're just going to go ahead and prep our shallots. Now, if you don't have shallots, you can definitely use yellow onions. You can either mince these shallots, or if you want to do what I'm doing here, is I'm just going to simply grate them. Do this for a couple of reasons. One, it's a lot easier. 2, it helps break down the shallots a lot quicker, which means we are getting the water out of the shallot itself when we're cooking our sauce. And 3, it's a texture thing for me. I prefer in my sauce to have less bits and pieces of shallots, and if your mincing skills aren't great, this seems to do a pretty good job of getting all those bits and pieces into the sauce and allowing them to break down a little bit nicer. So we just go ahead and grate them like we would a piece of cheese, and that's about it. One thing I will mention is this can cause your eyes to tear up, so don't be surprised if that does happen. Once we have our cast iron or any type of pan you want to use, but cast iron generally works great for potatoes, we want to put a little bit more olive oil on here. We're going to make sure that that cast iron is nice and warm before our potatoes go in. Also, apologies for some of the camera work. Hopefully that does get a little bit better as we do more of these, but we'll do what we can. So you can see in the saucepan I added some butter. We're just going to let that start to melt and coat the bottom of the pot. And you can see right there I'm using an infrared thermometer just to check the temperature of my cast iron. I think it's around 300, so that's plenty warm for the potatoes. Again, they're going to take a little bit more time to cook anyway, so I wanted to get them on sooner rather than later. So in they go. We just throw them right in there. Nothing special. Again, if you have more people, maybe you're using a pound and a half to 2 pound of potatoes, you might need to do this in batches, but nothing super stressful or really different about it. You just don't want to overcrowd too much. You want to make sure that there's enough room to stir the potatoes, making sure they get browned on all sides. I'm actually just trying to break them up here where I cut them, but let them sit for a couple minutes, stir, let them sit for a couple minutes, and stir. If you're constantly moving them, they're not going to brown properly. You can see I'm just getting that butter all set up, and then once we're done there, we're going to add the shallots. And at this point, we're going to give the potatoes a quick little stir, again, making sure they're brown on all sides, stirring every couple minutes. And the shallots themselves will take about 3 to 4 minutes to start sweating. At that point, once we start to see them start to caramelize a little bit, we're going to add a little bit of white wine. You could use any dry wine. I'm using cooking wine here, using about a cup. And what we're going to do is we're going to let that reduce by half on medium heat. Once it reduces by half, we're going to add our chicken stock, which is half a cup. And we're going to add a little bit of cream in a couple of minutes. Just again, letting some of this reduce down a bit. And now we'll go ahead and add the cream and, of course, keep on stirring. Turn down the heat just a tad. Make sure it's not bubbling too much, but again, still reducing. It's going to start to thicken at this point. At this point, I'm just checking the potatoes, making sure they are done. I have them on low heat. Don't need to cook them anymore. Really just going to keep them warm. And for those who are cooking with stainless steel and maybe you don't have that infrared thermometer, another option is to use the water drop test. Preheat your pan, sprinkle a little water here, and you can see the little balls start to roll around. That generally gives us a good idea that we're heading in the right direction. We can see here my thermometer says 200, so I'm going to give it another couple minutes until it's about 325, 350. But while we wait, we can watch this little guy roll around in the pan there, trying to find his home. He's bouncing around, and we're going to play a little game. We're going to say, whee, look at that, look at this guy. Oh, round and around he goes. Look at that. That's a fun little game. Keep yourself occupied. And maybe a little too occupied. I definitely need some more hobbies. All right, let's get moving. He's out of the way now. And while our little water vapor friend dances around in the pan, we're going to add our last bit of ingredients for the sauce, which is the mustard here, followed by the chives, which I'll chop up and put in a second. And here we'll just chop some chives in. Again, feel free to mince them. I'm using scissors because I'm lazy and I think it looks cool. So we can see that I waited a little too long. My pan's a little bit too hot. The oil I have is sesame oil, so it will start to smoke around 440. So I gave it a couple minutes to cool down, and then I went ahead and I put my salmon in. Once the salmon's in, there's not much you need to do. Just let it sit for about 3 minutes. If you've never had salmon before, I recommend maybe a little bit longer so it's a little bit more cooked for you. Final tip on the sauce side, if the sauce doesn't seem to be becoming the consistency that you like, then I would go ahead and add what's known as a cornstarch slushy. That's just 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, 1 tablespoon of cold water. You do not want to put cornstarch directly into this or it will clump up and look horrible. So once you mix the cornstarch with your cold water, go ahead and pour it in there. Within maybe a couple minutes, not even, your sauce will start to thicken. At this point, just gonna do my best to try and turn my salmon without destroying it. Sometimes salmon can feel a little bit flaky and brittle. Depends on where you get your salmon, but just try to ease it back into the pan. You don't want to throw it over there. It might break up. You might splash oil in your fish. You might get third-degree burns. We don't want any of that. So let's just be careful, okay? All right, salmon's on there. Now, if I'm being honest, I probably could have left it on there for another minute or two, but I'm happy with what we have right now. We're just going to put that on a plate for the time being. Now, if you were cooking for more people, you could throw 2 more salmon in. Again, it's going to be about 5-6 minutes per piece of salmon. You can get 2 cooked at the same time. You're pretty good. And now we're just going to start plating. Going to get some yummy potatoes on here. Smelling delicious, smelling like that rosemary and thyme. We just need parsley and sage, and we'd have ourselves a band. And now we got the salmon, and we're going to add the final piece of the puzzle, which is our gorgeous little mustard sauce. And that's all there is to it. Now, granted, this is only salmon and potatoes. It's nothing special, but I think it is one of the more delicious meals that I've served up during one of our sessions. I actually served this session up, or I served this meal up, because the session had to deal with a lot of trades and imports, and I believe during it someone mentioned something about fish, so it kind of gave me the idea to go with fish. Feel free to add additional layers to this. If you wanted to have corn or asparagus or another vegetable or a salad, it would go well with this. Final piece of advice I'd offer here on the first session is don't be afraid to try these recipes or to try any recipes when it comes to cooking on yourself first. It can be intimidating to cook for a lot of people, especially when we're all planning sessions and encounters and we have 1,000 other things going on in our mind when it comes to D&D. Take some time when you're not as busy to spend 30-45 minutes to cook yourself the same meal. At least then you have a familiarity with it. You may not be pressed for time. You may understand the recipe or maybe even mess up. Messing up is part of learning. Don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid to reach out there and just try and fail. And if it happens, well, maybe the next time will be better. It's happened to me plenty of times. That's the first point of advice I think on this channel that I would give anybody is don't let fear stop you from becoming better. So try this recipe out, try a different recipe out that I come out with later on, and let me know how it works out for you. Hope you've enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.